Welcome to the Black Market. I'm your host, Cobalt. Today, we're looking at Slay the Spire 2. There's a conversation happening in the Slay the Spire 2 community right now that I want to push back on. The debate is whether this is a real sequel or whether it's just a really good expansion. And I get why people are asking. You boot up Slay the Spire 2 having played the original, and the first thing you notice is that it feels familiar. Same map, same climb, same core loop. The menu screen is almost identical. Pick cards, build a deck, kill bosses, die, try again. So the question makes sense on the surface, but I feel like the framing is wrong. Because it assumes a real sequel and faithful to the original are opposites. Like a sequel only counts if it breaks from what it came from before. That's not how good sequels work. That's how sequels that lose the plot work. What Megacrit did here is actually harder than reinvention. They keep everything that made the first game what it was and then found every place where it had left something on the table. That's a surgical job. It requires you to know your original well enough to be honest about its limits without being embarrassed by them. Most studios can't do that. They either play it so safe that sequels are redundant, or they overcompensate and make something that has the name but it's lost its soul. Slay the Spire 2 does neither, and a big part of why is that they didn't try to build on top of a flawed foundation. They started from scratch in a new engine, which meant they could make the game they actually wanted rather than patch around constraints of what already existed. There's another complaint floating around that I wanted to address while we're here, because it comes from the same misreading. Some people are saying that since Slay the Spire 2 already has more content than Slay the Spire 1 at full release, it should just launch as a finished game. Whatever Megacrit plans to add later should be DLC, not early access updates. And on the surface, that's not an unreasonable position. But it misses something about how Megacrit actually operate. Slay the Spire 1's success didn't come from Megacrit guessing right about what players wanted. It came from them watching, quietly, carefully, while people played, noting how players actually interacted with their game. What builds were being attempted, which runs were breaking down, which mechanics were being ignored, and which ones players were finding uses for that nobody anticipated. That observational patience is a huge part of how they got so good at this. It's arguably what allowed them to create the template that an entire genre was built on. Early access isn't a business decision for them, it's a methodology. How they make the game better than they could make it alone. The co-op is the clearest example of them getting this right, and it's also where I expect the most pushback. Slay the Spire 1's veterans have legitimate concern here. The original was specifically about being alone with the problem. Every decision yours, every mistake yours. The whole conversation was between you and the RNG with nobody else in the room. That isolation wasn't a limitation, it was load-bearing. So adding multiplayer should have broken something fundamental about what the game is, but it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is that they didn't add multiplayer to Slay the Spire 1, they built a co-op mode that understands why the solo experience works and leaves it completely intact. The solo game is still exactly what it was. The co-op is its own thing that grew from the same roots. You vote on map routes together, you can use potions on teammates, and there are cards that only exist in co-op, a combo system where one player's debuff is specifically designed to be exploited by another player's follow-up. It's not four people playing the same game simultaneously, it's a new way to think about the same systems. There's also something worth saying about where this came from. Megacrit made Slay the Spire 1 because they wanted to make a deck-building single-player experience. That was the whole point of the original. Now they've looked at the genre they created, seen what 7 years of the community has done with it, and asked why shouldn't there be an option to bring friends? The fact that they're the ones who figured out how to do this well isn't a coincidence. Nobody understands the game's DNA better than they do. The Ancient system is another place Slay the Spire 2 finishes something that the original left incomplete. Slay the Spire 1 had lore. It was in the card flavor text, the events, the bosses, but the game never required you to engage with it. You could play hundreds of hours and the Spire would still feel like a backdrop. Slay the Spire 2 makes the world mechanically present. The Ancients you meet at the start of each act offer relics with real consequences attached. Each Ancient has unique dialogue with each character, so you see what changes depending on who you're playing. The world now pushes you back. I know what you're thinking. I can just click through and play optimally. And yeah, you can. But that's true of every piece of writing in every game ever made. That's not an argument against its existence. For players who pay attention, it adds a layer that was always missing. The Spire now feels more like somewhere rather than something. The alternate act system is probably one of the more subtle additions to the game, but in the long run, I think it's probably going to be one of the more important ones. Familiarity with Slay the Spire 1 eventually makes it feel readable. Strangeness fades. Slay the Spire 2 reshuffles environments and encounter distribution between runs, so the structure doesn't have a fixed shape. More permutations means the game earns more hours before it starts feeling solved. For a game built on replayability, that's pretty awesome. None of these are reinventions, they're completions. A sequel's job is to take the feedback of the time and the new ideas and use them to finish what the original started. Slay the Spire 2 did that. The world is now a world, social experience is designed rather than absent, and the structure stays, surprisingly deeper into the run count. The game didn't need to become something else, it needed to become more fully itself. When people say Slay the Spire 2 feels like an expansion, what they actually mean is that it feels like Slay the Spire. They're saying it like it's a problem. It's not. It's the whole point. That's not an expansion, that's a sequel that understood its own assignment. As for early access, yeah, it's worth buying now. With honest caveats, there's no true ending yet, achievements aren't live, and more content's coming. Now, the price goes up at 1.0, Megacrit confirmed that. What's here already is more content than Slay the Spire 1 had at full release, and it launched to 500,000 concurrent players with overwhelmingly positive reviews. If you want to be present and watch the development process as it's being built, then you can. But if you're one of those people who needs the finished version, waiting is a completely reasonable call. If you made it this far into the video, a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to grow the channel right now and every little bit helps. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. I stream on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, so feel free to stop by and say hi. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another video, guys. Peace out.